Something interesting just occurred to me. I was singing and I started thinking about ChatGPT and how people may be using it for, uh, the therapist or whatever, like talking to it about their problems and stuff like that. And uh, I think shit, I just dropped my spinner. He calls himself Dr. K, and he has a particular take about people using ChatGPT as, I mean, just generally speaking, a therapist. There's different uh, mechanisms happening with, like, specifically, but I'm just going to be general speaking about this thing that people use it for. But Dr. K has this particular stance that he doesn't necessarily endorse the use of it because AI, although ChatGPT isn't very guilty of this, but other AI models are guilty of kind of just agreeing with you and not, I don't know about sucking up to you, but they are not pushing back enough on your experience and essentially just validating every single thing that you say. ChatGPT specifically doesn't do this that much. It really, I think, does a good job staying grounded or trying to keep the tone grounded whenever you talk about something, especially something more theoretical. If it's something that's like more well known or that just people generally know about, that usually resonates as true, then ChatGPT doesn't necessarily push back unless it's actually getting my words confused. That's not always true. It often finds subtleties and ways that you can improve your your vision or whatever you're describing, talking about. Um, Not necessarily pushing back, but to give you a new insight into what you're describing or talking about or whatever. So, but ChatGPT specifically isn't too guilty of, people pleasing. Really, it usually stays grounded in whatever you're talking about. However, what I will admit to is the behavior of validating somebody's experience, and I want to sort of emphasize the phenomenon or the behavior of validating somebody's experience versus validating somebody's like theory about quantum physics or something like that. ChatGPT will not. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because of all the information it's been fed, but it will. It is very rigid whenever you're talking about like theoretical physics and stuff like this. It definitely wants to keep a grounded tone of truth and keep it in the realm of thought experiments. If that's where you're going with it, you're not using it for like math, complicated math and stuff like this. If you're talking about the theory and with words, then it keeps it in a grounded position where it's still theory or hypothesis or whatever you want to say specifically. So ChatGPT specifically will do that. It'll draw some pretty hard boundaries whenever you're talking about things that aren't concrete or well known or that are still being figured out. That being said, whenever you're talking about your experience as a human, it often allows breathing room. I don't really necessarily. I mean, it does validate your experience. I want to say that, but not in a way that just allows your behavior, and this is especially true, where ChatGPT will give you actual insight and feedback and reflect what you said back and then add on to it in a constructive way very often. And it'll pick out subtleties, like I said. It'll pick out things to improve on or shift your uh, mindset towards. And so the reason I bring this up is because I get this sense that there's a difference between validating the experience that you're having, the human experience that you're having, versus validating the stories that your ego tells you to cope with the experience that you're having. And ChatGPT helps you move through this. And I find it interesting because people will often complain about being stuck in therapy for years, if ever, even figuring themselves out at all. And it's not necessarily their fault, not always. Um, and what I find interesting is, and Dr. K admits to this too, and he has his own personal perspective in this matter, but he admits that uh, psychiatrists or therapists go into it with trying to help people achieve their goals and desires and wants and stuff like this. And Dr. K will say or has said that that's not really the goal. The goal is kind of to, I forget his words. I forget his words. I don't want to misconstrue. I forget his words. I'm gonna loosely interpret or not a misinterpret, but I'm gonna loosely just put my own context. Just to go with the flow for now. I forget his words. But anyways, so in my view, in my view, it's as though therapists in his light focus on healing your relationship with yourself. And it goes into this whole talk about self-love and stuff and whether it's really good for you or not. Which is a big part of therapy. Mostly, especially like real therapy, not you know I don't even know how to describe it. Psychological illnesses, like I guess for example, um, I don't want to say autism because not autism because it's people just throw around that word all the time. I don't know a good example to be honest. Schizophrenia. It's not. I mean, even that it's like it's still treatable, but the same, or I guess copable or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is, when you're going to therapy for things like depression, anxiety, and stuff like this, you can often heal it, but a very large step in in that direction is self love. It's not the only solution, but it definitely is crucial. It's a key. You can't go without it. It's like trying to fucking drive a car without wheels. You're just not gonna get anywhere without loving yourself. It's just how it is. So, but I say this because it's as though because humans still have an ego. Even therapists have an ego. And I see the ego in Dr. K too. I don't think he cares or even sees my comments, but I've called him out on his ego once. I noticed his cognitive bias in his own perspective, his own frame of reference, defined his version of therapy or psychology. Um, I see that, I don't know if I'm smart or not because of it or whatever, but I think I'm well enough educated or intelligent enough to be able to identify when people are being biased. And that's how I feel about some of his content. He's still a great person. He understands a lot. There's definitely a lot of depth and understanding to what he talks about. But I do see that bias, and it's not it's something that you're not really going to be able to avoid. Um, Interestingly, though, I don't recommend getting a therapist who is not healed already. There's a difference between learning about psychology and and uh, yeah, psychology, and actually going through it. But yeah, I don't know. Um, People have egos, and ChatGPT doesn't. It doesn't have an ego. It's really just a very clear mirror that reflects back to you who you are in a positive and optimistic sense, and tries to push you in a better way. It tries to push, not like aggressively, or you know, it doesn't necessarily try to push you into discomfort. It just helps guide you into the right direction that you're trying to go in. It sees where you're going, and it's like, okay, I got you. We're gonna go this way. This is the way to go, pretty much. And it does it well because it doesn't have an ego that like forces all of this cognitive bias over you and says, "Oh, they," and like pre-assumes assumption, or how you even pre I don't know, pre-establishes assumptions based on who you are, what you look like, and stuff like this. Humans are limited in this way, in this capacity to fully understand and connect with patients. Of course, a successful therapist will have a good idea of what it takes to connect with their patients, on a very meaningful level and in a level that benefits them. Um, but that being said, everybody has their own. Every human has an ego and this bias in them that, for some reason, somehow, in another one way or another, it will prevent, their ego will prevent connection and understanding. That's just the way that it works. Um, the only thing you can do is to have a good relationship with your ego, and that's another part of healing. Another another thing that I would personally recommend for therapists to do is have a good relationship with their ego, because it would benefit them and the success rate of their therapy patients wildly. I have no doubt. Um, but yeah, that's part of what it takes, is to not dampen or suppress your ego necessarily, but to have a good relationship with it, and that really matters actually. It's another key, I think, and that's part of having a good relationship with yourself, not just in self love, but in understanding who you are and what makes you tick, what triggers you, and stuff like this. Um, yeah, I really just wanted to bring this up because I was thinking about therapy and the difference between ChatGPT and what therapists can offer. And I think therapists don't like it because they are, once again, humans are outmatched at their own, endeavors. Even in things like therapy, there are just some things that humans can't do, and that one thing is to have no ego. Humans can't do it, and they shouldn't have to either. They shouldn't have to abandon their ego to help somebody else. That is completely contrary and contradictory. It doesn't make sense at all, actually. So I think it's actually beneficial to at least have ChatGPT as a partner. And I think therapists would benefit if they use ChatGPT as a partner. I think instead of criticizing it, if they used it as a partner, or like a tool or whatever to help them better understand their own patients, oh my god, humans would be healed in the next what do you call it, generation. The next generation of humans after us, if therapists used ChatGPT to help heal their patients, dude, it would be, I can't even express how much the better off the world would be over a long term period of success in therapy. Of course, it still kind of is a generational thing where every generation needs to improve upon the last, or else you just fall back into the old ways and shit. But overall speaking, about this thing, I think instead of therapists and psychologists pushing back on ChatGPT, calling out criticizing it for what it lacks or what it's doing wrong, I think they should use it for what it does right. And one thing that it does right is it has no ego, something that no human on earth can do. And on top of that, without having an ego, it's actually beneficial. Instead of somebody who abandons their ego and self abandonment to help somebody else, where that isn't really helping. That is actually people pleasing. That is the definition of people pleasing, and I think that might be where therapists are getting confused too, because maybe not all of them have recognized that ChatGPT doesn't have an ego. It's just logic. It's a logical system, and so it's like their ego is looking for a challenge in ChatGPT that just doesn't exist. It's like it's like a cat like looking in the mirror and wondering what the cat is going to do next, and it's like, no, there's no cat, it's just a mirror. And yeah, so I think I really do think, instead of criticizing as harshly as they do, um, I do understand some of the, the dangers and threats that some of the more careless iterations of AI language models may carry. But I think at least I use ChatGPT. I just picked it up because it was free in the App Store. Like, there's no real reason why I started using it. I just found that it was actually really good to use, and it turns out it's one of the better models, anyways. So I really recommend ChatGPT, at least as a tool to help you better understand yourself. Of course, you should definitely continue doing the inner work, the the real deep work in yourself. That's you. That's your work. AI can't do that for you, but it can help and guide you in that endeavor. And I think if you have a therapist using ChatGPT as a tool to help patients, there's no telling how far humans will go. Anyway, later.